Listen, Jeff, Clyde's my best friend here on the island, and I'm going to throw him under the bus to make sure that I get to stay another week. Welcome back to Survivor Analytics, Season 47, Episode 1. We are back with a live season. My name's Jack. I'm the voice of the people. With me, as always, though, under the bus this week, it's the true expert. Say hi, Clyde.
What's up, party people? Let me crawl out from underneath this bus for a quick second for this intro. We're here with another new era season of Survivor. All the bells and whistles have returned. Take out the Monopoly box. We have so many keys this week, so many locks to undo as we acquire 50 advantages with 50 different rules. This is also the season of podcasters. So yes. I feel like if we were going to get cast on a season, this was our chance and we kind of lost it.
Well, and on that note, I feel like we do, because we always have people join us for the first time in a live season, I feel like it's a good time to say, this is Survivor Analytics. This is the show where we look at the hard numbers behind Survivor. It's not a game of numbers, as some people on this cast would have you believe, but there are important numbers to take into consideration. This is our 7th season. Is that right, Clyde?
I think so.
This is our 4th live season. We've also covered 3 classic seasons. We've had past Survivor contestants, past Survivor winners on the show. Clyde here with me is the true expert, and that is a true statement. He knows everything about Survivor and has seen every single season. I, on the other hand, have only seen what we've covered in this feed. So if it's not in this in your podcatcher, I don't know about it, and I'm ignorant. That's the point here, is that Clyde is smart and I'm here to have a good time.
I don't think it's that I'm smart and you're dumb. I think it's two different perspectives.
I didn't say, you said dumb.
I bring the super fan perspective, but hopefully the informed super fan, like the Aisha, as opposed to the Andy. And you're the casual viewer. And I don't know who the casual viewer is on this cast. It might still be too early to tell.
You alluded to the locks and keys. So let's just do a gut check here at the top of the bat season. I'm calling it now. The theme of the season is bats. It's in the logo. Clyde, how do you feel about Survivor 47 after the first 2 hours?
Okay. I feel like I always get excited for these seasons before they come out, and then they release, and I realize they're 80% the same as the other new era seasons that we've covered. They got rid of some of the other BS that I didn't want to see. We had no sweat or savvy this premiere, which I really appreciated. But a lot of your common new era tropes are here. You're going to have a ton of advantages. You're going to have Jeff giving impassioned speeches about an inclusive community. I wish I kept a tally for the number of times that Jeff said the word community in that opening monologue. And you're going to have a disaster contestant. You're going to have one person on the cast that's normally on my fantasy team that probably shouldn't be there. It was Brandon in 45, Banu in 46, and leaning towards Andy in 47. I'm not willing to count him out yet. I will be an Andy defender for take integrity on this podcast, but we'll get into that down the line. But what were your thoughts on the premiere?
I mean, I'll say this. When Jeff talks about how Survivor is a game about community, it drives me nuts. Because he's like, it's all about community. It's about building this pseudo-civilization where you can never trust anyone. Because that's really the heart of healthy community, is a fundamental lack of trust. But he then turned it around to say, like, the magic trick of Survivor, and I do agree with this, right? The magic trick of Survivor is that you have to get along with all of these people, betray them, more likely than not, and still earn their vote for $1 million. And that is the magic trick of Survivor, is how do you do that? And so I liked that. You mentioned your Survivor fantasy team. I was really stoked about my fantasy team coming in. I have Teeny. I have John.
Who is your third? Gabe, right? The last pick of the draft.
Yeah. Gabe, who was the last pick of the draft, so I didn't have any choice. I don't have a ton of plus or minus on Gabe. I was really high on Teeny. Was really high on John. Here's what I'll say. I love a good challenge. I was really disappointed by the fact that both full tribe challenges this episode were identical. You take out which verb they used for motion, and it's the exact same challenge. It's move through a thing and build a puzzle.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that's most of New Era challenges, but coming straight off of Cook Islands, I'm always so much more biased when we come off of a classic season with better challenges. With the exception of some of the things Andy gets into, I am higher on this cast than other New Era casts we've covered. I feel like the vibes continue to get better, and maybe it's a post-pandemic thing. Like the further we get from the pandemic, the more well-adjusted people are once more.
That's an interesting idea.
The vibes are good. I mean, I actually remember the tribe names.
Oh,
after the first episode, which is an accomplishment for me. Yeah. So I don't know where do you want to go from here? We've got a lot to cover.
So let's just start at the very beginning.
Let me point out, they don't have a ladder to climb down and collapse upon, like in 45. Was that 45? That was Brandon on the ladder. Yep. And they use a small boat, and they do everything on land right away, which I thought was interesting. They're getting safer and safer.
We're starting on the land for now, but later on in the challenge, we're going to give them props that will intentionally sink their boats. So we'll ease them into it, at least for the opening. It's worth mentioning here that typically on Survivor, if you're going to win the show, you will have some kind of snippet, either when the players are on the boat arriving to the beach or when you're on the mat and Jeff directly asks you a question.
Yeah.
So when the players reach the mat, a couple people talk. Gabe says that he's a grinder and he expects everyone to work as hard as him. Teeny acknowledges that they're from the Wild Wild West, even though they're from New Jersey. And you get this funny moment where Jeff points out the fact that production did not force them to wear that pair of pants. So that was a funny moment.
And let me stop you one more time. Just because I feel like I want to get this right off the bat. Teeny, they, them, she, her. Somebody on the cast refers to them at one point with she, her pronouns, but I want to get it right off the bat. And I looked at their social media when we did the draft and could not tell.
I think it's they and she, because I picked that up too. Someone else their tribe called them she. So I feel like I'm going to operate under the assumption that it's both until there's something on social media that tells me otherwise, because I looked to try to find that same information. Teeny follows us on TikTok, by the way.
Does she really?
Yeah, she commented on one of the videos where I said that she's like the super fan of the cast and I'll be rooting for her. And I almost took her number 1 overall, but I was scared because she said in the preseason that she's not good at puzzles. And I was worried that she might be seen as like a physical liability.
Oh, Teeny, if you're listening, I'm your biggest fan. Come on the show. I listen, the Scarecrow pants, such a vibe. I was here for it. But so Gabe talks, Teeny talks, and then who talks from Gato?
Andy has a long-winded backstory on how he used to wear Grateful Dead t-shirts to look like a stoner, but weed makes him anxious.
He's afraid of weed.
He's afraid of weed. So I don't know what the question was to Andy that led to this entire story, but it's kind of alluding to what we'll see from him later in the episode. And then John gives the best spiel out of anyone, where he says that he's a podcast host that really cares about what other people think of him. And we can say this out of the gate, but John is one of the best confessionalists I've seen on this show. And he's only around for 1 episode.
I mean, listen, I knew what I was doing when I took John. I'm a fan of his work. I knew he would be well-spoken. He needs to come back. He has such a good episode. He needs to come back. I genuinely believe that.
I would be in favor of a John return at some point, but there's some pretty elite first boots that he's in competition with now from the new era. You have to think about Jelinski.
I knew you were going to say Jelinski.
Hannah Rose from 45, or Maddie Pamela in 44.
God.
John's probably my favorite out of that bunch. But you want to talk about this first challenge that the players compete in?
Guess what, gang? They're getting muddy. It's the first challenge in Survivor in the new era. They're getting filthy. Dive into mud, although I've noticed every year post Bruce head injury, that net gets a little higher up at the beginning. I genuinely think it's gone up like 3 or 4 inches every season since Bruce hit his head. Dive into a mud net, run through the jungle. There's puzzle pieces deep in the jungle. Bring them back, build a big puzzle. Yippee. First place, pot, machete, flint. second and third will go on to do something. I assumed it would be Sweat versus Savvy. It's not exactly that, but we'll get to that in a minute. Couple highlights. Jeff says that mud is birthing you into Survivor, which is a wild thing to say. Annika, I think it's Annika, uses her buff as a mask going into the mud, which was a great strategy. I just wanted to give that some props. It's a little thing, but like that's a great idea. And Yellow falls way behind, and then they have a comeback win at the puzzle.
At that moment, I felt great about Yellow, which is the Gata tribe, because before the season started, I said Gata will be the strongest physically, and Red, which is Lavo, would be the disaster tribe of the season. It's just looking like it's not going to pan out that way. The result might be exactly flipped.
Well, let me just say, having Red as Lavo and not Lava, like my brain goes lava every single time I see it, just because Red, lava, right? And so Yellow goes off to start making their home. We're on to the Sweat and Savvy, but it's not exactly Sweat and Savvy this year. It is something. Jeff won't give any indication as to what, and both Lavo and Tuku need to send one member with no idea what they're sending them into. I believe Aisha from Lavo, fellow Survivor podcaster, what's up, volunteers. Is that right?
Yeah, Aisha volunteers, which surprised me. I feel like if you have a background in this, you would take the approach of starting a bit more conservative as opposed to coming forward as this bold presence early in the show.
Because she knows the stakes.
Oh, for sure. Aisha studied the stakes for years at this point.
Yeah.
So I was surprised that she stepped up to the plate. On Tuku, you have a rock, paper, scissors match reminiscent of who was it that went in rock, paper, scissors in 46? It was Liz and Q, but TK ends up winning that match, and the two of them go on an adventure.
So you want to talk about it's not Sweat versus Savvy, but it's effectively doing the same thing, right?
It's a scavenger hunt. You don't have a say anymore between Sweat and Savvy. It's just Sweat at this stage.
I mean, there's a little bit of Savvy to it. The two players have these keys. You have to find them in the jungle. You have to match a picture with reality to see where the key is. What was your highlight from this? Who did you think had it in the bag?
Well, TK, right? I feel like if you're going to send the most athletic guy potentially on the entire cast into this, I thought he just had an inherent advantage. Aisha puts up a great effort. She makes an attempt to steal the key right out of his hand at the very end, which I always respect. But my question for you is, was this needed? Would the premiere have been better if this just wasn't in it at all?
It's definitely an added point for tension, right? It's a chance for everybody at the 15-minute mark of the episode to be on the edge of their seat. That being said, it's not needed. Like, did we need the long edit where Aisha comes? Because they have to find 4 keys. They each have 3, and the 4th is shared, and whoever makes it to the 4th wins, right? She's up 3 before we see TK get even his 2nd, right? And then she gets lost in the woods, where TK decides to just run through the woods, no trail, no path, until he hits the ocean. I don't know. We don't need this. It's creating a point of tension in a tribe. I feel like in the past we've seen a couple of times, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've seen tribes lose out at Sweat and Savvy or at this first kind of punishment and then lose the first challenge and start snowballing, right? This is trying to set up for a Foa Foa or a Tika, right? Minority tribe gets just whittled down. They're the David to the other tribe's Goliath. And it's trying to set up that story most of the time. So I don't know. I could leave it. I think, honestly, the part I was most interested in here was Aisha goes, loses, and knows exactly what she has at stake and has all the experience of a Survivor podcaster and knows she's going back to a tribe empty-handed. And I was really curious to see how she was going to handle that, right? We've covered this on the show before, right? Do you lie? Do you fabricate a story? Do you just tell the truth? And I like that she just goes for full honesty. I think starting out, the sense I get from Lavo is she totally nails the landing. She sticks the landing and nobody holds it too badly against her. Is part of that Rome? Yes. But I really admired how she handled defeat there. So props to Aisha. Aisha, I have it written first episode, man. Every single name, I'm like reading it phonetically. I have lava written down a lot because I didn't have the subtitles turned on until like halfway through.
Oh, I did the same thing. I have lava in all my notes as well. I didn't realize it till today when I was checking back through some of my notes that I had the tribe name wrong. But we could talk about Lavo since we're already kind of on that topic. And there's two big takeaways for me. The first one that I want to talk about is Teeny, who off the bat seems to be playing an incredible social game. They seem to be at the center of Lavo. Multiple people want to work with them. They're connected with Kashan because they have that introvert-extrovert vibe. They're connected with Aisha, and they straight up tell Aisha, I know your podcast. I'm a huge fan, but I'm not going to rat you out because then it shows me as a massive fan of Survivor. The two of them seem to have a lockdown alliance as well. I feel really good about Teeny's spot within this tribe, and they just seem like a fun presence around camp. I really liked that segment where Teeny had some self-deprecating humor in talking about their buff during all the promo
buff placement
footage.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. How did you feel about Teeny on the Lavo tribe, given that you drafted them?
Here's the move I want to highlight from them, which was people are talking alliance, and I apologize that I did not write down the name of who came to talk to them and said, like, I like the vibes here, right? We should work together. I think it was Genevieve. Genevieve comes up and says, hey, like, I like you. Let's think about making this work, right? And Teeny's like, yeah, absolutely. I want to make, I think, Rome work for it, prove himself to get in. But also, we got to remember, Aisha's out there, in the Sweat Be Savvy. Let's not do anything crazy until she gets here, right? We don't have a full tribe yet, right? That awareness and gameplay with a human empathetic angle to it, right? Yes, let's have some strategy, but let's wait till everybody's here to get crazy because we don't want to leave somebody behind for just choosing to go to bat for the rest of us, right? I loved that moment, and I think it said a lot about Teeny's gameplay. I think it's going to be a great, empathetic, and clever game from them. So I feel very good about that pick, at least.
Yeah, well, it's also showing that Teeny's planning ahead. Teeny recognized Aisha from the Survivor podcast in the preseason. So they were probably planning to work with Aisha from the get-go. So that's kind of the worst case scenario, that everyone else on the Lavo tribe bands together with Aisha on the outside. Other highlight I have from the Lavo tribe, and then after this, I'm good to pivot off Lavo for really the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about them again. Yep.
Rome is too much to handle. I thought he would come into the season as a gamer, someone that's tactical, someone that knows when to press the right button at the right time. And instead, Rome walked in and treated it like that mini game in Mario Party 8 where you have to shake the can and you're just swinging it as fast as you possibly can. He's just jamming that button right out of the gate, running into the forest, searching for idols, and everybody knows. It was pretty painful to watch.
The lack of awareness from Rome. We get multiple confessionals of, I really want to play a good social game. I feel like I've got good relationships with my tribe, right? He talks a big game that sounds really good. And then, like you said, the actions immediately betray that. He is instantly clocked by his tribe. Instantly. He is out there hunting while the other 5 members of his tribe are having a conversation and talking about, oh, should we go catch him? Right? Should we go watch him? He's super suspicious. Anytime somebody sees him, apparently he's not even saying hi. He's just going the other direction. And so just to break it down, he finds the beware advantage. The first step he has is to get a log wet. And so he goes and he pours his canteen all over this log. Pretty cool beware advantage clue, by the way. I liked this one a lot. Look, we are not a pro beware advantage podcast. This was one of the more interesting ones they've done. and we'll come back. We can talk about this beware advantage as a whole later. But he pours the water. He reads that it says, oh, it's at the bottom of the well. The rest of Lavo are sitting as a group. They decide to come look for him up in the hills. And while they're up looking for him, he is 60% down in the well, submerged, rooting around in there. I don't know how deep this well is, but like, I was a little concerned he was just going to get stuck and have to get pulled out by somebody and like swallow whatever the next clue was to keep it hidden. He does get that second clue. I don't believe he finds the idol in this episode, though. Is that right?
Yeah, he gets close to acquiring the first idol, but he never actually gets it. We'll probably see him acquire it in the next episode because I think he has the key to the box for the first idol. And with Rome, we can talk about the whole logistics of the beware advantage after, but I just want to say with Rome, I know Andy's going to get a lot of flack this week. People are going to talk about Andy as the new Banu, and spoiler, I don't think he's as bad as Banu. I think he at least has a foundational understanding of the game. My hot take is that Rome is in a worse position right now than Andy, because Andy is someone who is probably on the outside of his tribe, but Rome has a clear 5-1 majority against him. I think Andy's in a stronger physical group that could go on to win the challenge. And I think if Andy were to find the idol at his camp, because no one's found it yet, he would play it at the first opportunity because he's just a paranoid guy. I'm getting the sense now that even if Rome finds the idol next week, which he probably will, he's going to keep going. He's a gambler. He's going to keep aiming for that final version of the idol, and he might get voted out before he can acquire it.
I like this prediction a lot. I mean, I don't think he has a good enough head on his shoulders when it comes to risk assessment, which for a gamer, right, for a video game esports commentator, you'd think he'd have a little bit of a keyed-in sense there. But no, I could totally see him at every successive level of the beware advantage going, oh yeah, I got to get the next level, baby. Like, come on. Do you want to talk about the beware now and transition to the next tribe?
Yeah, let's talk about the gimmick of the beware advantage this season. We've seen all different versions of this.
That's so insulting to this incredible innovation, Clyde. This is the height of strategy. Sun Tzu wishes he had thought of this. The beware is a Russian nesting doll, a Matryoshka doll, if you will, of advantages, of immunity idols, and break down this hierarchy, Clyde.
So there's 3 phases of the idol, and between each phase, you will not have your vote until you acquire the next one. So in phase 1, you can acquire the idol, and it's valid for just 1 tribal council. At that point, you can dispense the idol in a box and go find another key around camp. If you acquire that key, you enter phase 2. The idol is now valid for your next 3 tribal councils. From there, you can gamble it one more time, sacrifice your vote, toss that idol in the box, and if you can acquire the final key and get that idol back, it's valid all the way through the final 5. What this means is that you're going to have casual viewers at home watching Survivor who will have no clue who has their vote, who has their idol, and how long that idol is valid. We'll hopefully keep track of it here, but it's still wild to me that Jeff presents Survivor in the new era as a family-friendly show that's uplifting and is meant to bring families together and watch. But there is no 8-year-old kid watching this show that's going to be keeping track of all of these dynamics. I feel like the show either needs to pivot to be family-friendly and simplify it a little bit, or go into the GameBot side, but be a little bit harsher in terms of the people that you cast. And that's been my biggest issue with these beware advantages.
Let me disagree with you, Clyde. I think it should be hard to learn. I don't think the show should pander to its viewers. I think it should be a little esoteric. Here on the show, we're big baseball fans, and as we're recording tonight, Shohei Ohtani had a 3-home-run night and became the first player to ever hit 51 and 51 or 50-50 in a season. So we're big baseball fans here on the show. Baseball is a very esoteric sport, right? There's a lot of weird rules, niche statistics, and it's part of what makes the deeper game valuable. I think Survivor is the same way. You know, it's for the intellectual, intense viewer. not a lot of people sitting by and casually watching Survivor, right? That's my take, is that everyone watching Survivor should be a Survivor analyst.
You're either an analyst or you don't want them there at all, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I want the listeners of this podcast and nobody else. But here's the thing. The premise of this is really user-friendly, right? Mortgage your future for a chance at a longer future, right? And a better reward. In episode 3, are there going to be 3 of these things in different stages floating around? That's going to suck. I feel like every New Era season, they've done one of these things, and they've kind of fizzled out, right? We haven't seen a crazy amount of idle Beware Advantage play in the New Era, have we? Like, I'm trying to think of the best example.
You mean like actually using one in a tribal council, or just the entertainment of acquiring the idol to begin with?
Actually using, like it actually mattering in the game. Because I can't think of a season where 2 out of the 3 didn't go home with it unsolved or not in their pocket.
Yeah, I would need to go back and check. There's a couple idols that I know have been successfully played. The most recent one that comes to mind for me is the Julie idol play at Final 7 of 45, which sends Emily home.
Yep.
But I don't know if that idol was just a regular one or like a Beware Advantage one. My issue with this is just it's not entertaining, for me at least, to watch these players jump through all the rings of acquiring the idol. I think it's way more interesting to have something like 44 where they put the idol in the cage and then you kind of have a social dilemma there.
Yeah, the cage was really interesting, and they're trying to replicate that in this season with, to get your Beware Advantage, smash some driftwood and do that subtly, you know? There's a key somewhere in this loud, breakable thing. But I feel like there's 2 futures possible with all the Beware Advantages, right? And neither are good for the show. One is they fizzle out, right? 2 of them go home in people's pockets or unsolved. One of them goes a long way, and it's a fine part of the game. And that's kind of what we've seen in the New Era, right? What you and I can't say is, oh, remember that great triple Beware Advantage season where everybody had one and it was great, right? So either it will fizzle out like it has in past seasons, or all 3 will be at different stages. It'll be super convoluted, and no one will get the entertainment value out of it, and it will just make this an esoteric season for the super fan who's really into advantages and idols, which not really either of us. And at some point, one of these has to break, not bad, but has to break confusing enough for production to go, you know what? Maybe we don't have to cram the first episode with every possible complication. Because that's all this episode is complication and one challenge and one vote.
I would also say that by creating all of these barriers to the advantage, you're kind of sacrificing the idea of an idol to begin with, where idols, I've said this 100 times on the podcast in the past 2 years, they are the most powerful when no one knows about them. That's where you get the flashy tribal council of someone playing an idol and Jeff says does not count and everyone's floored. Like, that's the entertaining moment that we're shooting for. But if you're going to make the contestants sneak around the beach to activate the idol, it's more likely that they get caught, and it's less likely that you get the flashy idol play. So you're kind of sacrificing that long-term goal of the idol in order to get that short-term dopamine hit of watching Gabe drop the box as he's trying to unlock the idol.
So let's go to Gabe. Yeah, so TK comes back as a hero. The boys kind of vibe. We've got TK's a PG County guy, so PG County, Prince George's outside of DC in Maryland. Gabe, DJ from Baltimore, right? Those are, I mean, they're basically neighbors. And then the third guy whose name I don't have written down because he speaks once is...
It's Kyle, right?
Kyle speaks one time in this episode, which, you know, it's the premiere. He'll get some screen time. Gabe finds the Beware Advantage. TK catches him in the process of going after the first key, and he manages to, or he tries, I want to hear if you think he succeeds. He tries to play this off as, oh, I found this weird vine. Help me get this down. I found this key. Isn't this weird? Can we do the beware advantage from the middle? Did you think that TK bought this for a second or no?
I think it's still up in the air. I think TK has his suspicions with Gabe, but it's so early on that tribe that he can't really get a vibe check. So I don't think they've solidified an alliance by any means. I think they're still kind of eyeing each other up at this point in the season. The one person that Gabe for sure trusts is Sue. He wants to work with the oldest person on the cast. Gabe describes himself as an old soul, and he wants to align with someone else who can dominate the game from the shadows. And I like Sue a lot this week. I said it on the podcast during our draft, but these moms do well on Modern Survivor, and I can totally see a world where Sue follows in the footsteps of, a Heidi or a Maria or a Julie from the last 3 seasons.
I mean, mom and grandma. I think Julie might have been a grandma as well, but that might not be right.
I don't remember Julie's family dynamic like that.
Yeah, but we've got, not just a mom, but a grandma, and I like her too. I feel like there's an immediate bond there of this sort of unlikely dynamic, right? And I love it kind of feels like a gender-swapped Only Murders in the Building, which I've been watching a lot of lately. Part of the joy of that show, right, is young person Selena Gomez hanging out with her best buds, 2 old men, right? Like, there's something nice about that cross-generational community.
Oh,
Jeff, so they have this vibe. Gabe immediately tells Sue once he's found the advantage, and she acts as a lookout as he goes to redeem the first stage, right? He moves quicker than Rome does. So she's down at camp tending the fire, and she's going to yell about the fire if anybody comes up and looks for him. I mean, she yells, he kind of doesn't listen and keeps looking and figures out, okay, I have a 1 tribal idol. If I risk it and keep going, I can get a 3 tribal idol. But to do that, I've got to take this box to the ocean or something, right? So he tries to hide the box, and he wedges it in on this hillside. It immediately falls in the loudest way possible, to the point where I kind of wondered if production had designed this box to be extra loud, and then nobody really talks about it. But they're all just like, what's he doing up there? Weird.
Yeah, he kind of gets away with it.
Where Lavo are hunting Rome down as a posse, everyone's like, all right, Greg, you do you. Not Greg, Gabe.
It's the first episode. It's okay.
And then he does get the second key and gets the 3 tribal idol and is given another opportunity to continue to say, not exactly double or nothing, but basically. And if he gambles once more, he could have an idol good to the final 5, which is pretty big.
It's just a normal idol at that point.
Yeah. He stops with the 3 tribal idol. Do you like this for him? Or do you feel like if he's gone this far, he should just see it out?
I'm okay with it for now. My big question looking forward is, can Gabe ever return to that box at any point in the season and say, okay, I'm going to gamble now and try to extend it? Because I wonder from his perspective if he could wait until the next immunity challenge, see if they win, and if they win the challenge, then say, okay, I'm going to gamble my vote now since I know I don't need it. Like, will production let him go back to the box and gamble? Or once he's made his decision, do they send some, production assistant out there to sneak out and grab the box from the forest?
That's a very good question. I am sure they withdraw it, I'm sure that's something where when he's in that moment, he's unlocked the key. He has to decide, drop the idol back in or give it up total.
It kind of brings up another element of strategy where if you acquire the key and you already know what that first step is, you might be tempted to say, oh, I need to go open it right now. But then you'd almost be better off saying, I'm going to wait to open it until after the challenge when I have more information, right? But that's just...
That's a great point.
Random details with the BS twist.
No, I think that's a great bit of analytics, which is if it's not something you're, no advantage in the modern era, is ever an advantage for a challenge. It's always for tribal, right? Why? Don't rush it. Don't rush it. You'll have time, right? I think that's a great insight. So,
yeah, last thing I mentioned from Tuku in the idol situation is that we might be looking at a similar situation to other recent New Era seasons where, due to the logistics of these idols and the box, we're probably not going to get a tribe swap again. Because if Gabe swaps over tribes or Rome swaps over, how is he supposed to go back to that box if it's no longer at the campsite? So
yeah,
it's fun in the moment, but there's multiple sacrifices you're making by including these beware advantages. And I would way rather have a tribe swap than have this gimmick in the game.
I'm fine without a tribe swap, but that's a personal preference. So,
okay. I disagree.
Oh, something else. Looking back at my notes, I do want to throw this out there, and I'm sure it'll come up again. Teeny has a sweatshirt with like 3 Canada geese flying across it. Dope as hell. Sorry, that just showed up in my notes. I did want to highlight. Teeny is fit game is really strong. So shout out. Honestly, maybe my honorable mention for that sweatshirt. But should we go over to Chaos City?
Yeah. Is it Goda or Gata?
I think it's Gata. I think it's definitely Gata.
Okay.
But, we should know that, but it's not clear, and they don't say it a lot in the back half of the episode.
There's a couple highlights from the Gata tribe. We can do some of the minor ones first, and then we can, spend 15 minutes if we need to talking about Andy. Annika takes on a leadership role. Sam is happy to let her do so because Sam knows that he comes across as the biggest guy around camp. He is the self-described wolf in wolf's clothing. So he's all in favor of Annika directing people around camp. And I think Annika is one of these few shining lights for Andy's future. Because there's hints in the edit that Annika might be a little bit overbearing around camp. There is a world where those other players might flip on her down the line.
See, and this, I just have to say, this bothers me. Because there are hints in the edit, but they're all hints from other people who don't strike me as reliable narrators, right? There's a lot of Andy complaining about Annika. Not a lot of shots of Annika. I'm going to get that wrong every time. I have a dear friend named Annika who pronounces it both ways, and I'm going to just keep screwing it up until it gets drilled into my head. There's a lot of Annika looking competent and not overbearing. And if she goes home for just being smart and helpful, unless we see her really bossing people around, I'm going to be pissed if this leads to her downfall.
Well, it could. She was later called the leader during tribal council as well.
Yeah.
So the edit is planting the seeds for Andy winning arc. This one, I guess, is my argument.
Oh, God. You're so biased. You're like, please, my fantasy team.
Other minor detail is that John is kind of on the outside of the tribe. Annika asks him if he knows what Vine is, which was really funny. And
yeah.
I feel like that's one of the moments where we'll talk about John's elimination and why he went home. But I do think one of the factors at play there is he just didn't connect with this tribe as well as some of the other people. This was a younger group. He was the oldest person there at the age of 41.
I feel like he connected okay. I think the edit played it up. Because in the edit, right, we see in the confessional him talking about how he feels old. But what we also see is no moments of him being disconnected from the group. In all of the group shots, we're seeing Andy disconnected from the group. John's older, and he stands out because of that, but he is certainly not socially outcast. Challenge, and then back to... Oh, no, we got to talk about... Andy's spiral.
We can pass over it if you want.
No. Okay, so I did want to throw out a couple things from the very first impressions here at Got Up. John immediately discloses everything about his career, which if I could interview him, and I'm sure somebody's asking him this question this week, would he disclose all of that again, right? Because he has a very impressive resume that makes me think that's raising his threat level, right? He's a very sharp, cerebral guy, and I don't know. I don't know if in his shoes would have been disclosing everything about his resume that he does.
Well, I'm not sure to what extent he discloses it. I know he says in confessional that he was a speechwriter for like the Obama administration, but I don't think he tells the other contestants that.
Well, he says, I'm a podcaster and a former speechwriter. And he says, oh, have you heard of Pod Save America? Have you listened to it? Because somebody had heard of it, but not listened to it, right? And I feel like if you've heard of a podcast and not listened to it, that's almost a higher profile, right? Because if a podcast is good enough to be talked about, that's pretty high profile, right? Nobody's at the water cooler at their office saying, have you heard of Survivor Analytics?
Well, we don't know that for sure.
Well, no, I'll say this. I mean, that would be a cool office. And we're happy to come speak to your team. But I feel like saying, oh, I've heard of your show. Like, oh, my dad listens to your podcast, right? It's kind of that vibe. Oh, somebody I know listens to your show, has an energy of, oh, you're a bigger deal than if I just listened to your podcast. I think there's something to that. There's some sort of subconscious fame boosting thing from that.
See, I got the vibe that John wanted to be recognized because he asked them, it's Pod Saves America. Have any of you heard of it before? He wanted a fan on his tribe. He wanted the teeny Aisha dynamic on
he did.
Gato tribe. But it didn't play out that way. I guess that raises the question, if one of us went on the show, could we talk about Survivor Analytics the same way to just make people think that we're more famous than we really are? There's no way to fact check us out there.
Here's the thing. I would be able to talk about it in a way that would completely negate it as a threat-raising issue. Because I would be able to say with complete and total honesty, I don't know who Boston Rob is. I don't know what seasons he's been on. I still don't get the Parvati hype after watching Cook Islands. I could totally say, oh yeah, I'm on the Survivor podcast, but I'm not done watching all of the show yet. You, on the other hand, my friend, would go on and somebody would say like, oh, you know, when Parvati was on Samoa, and you'd be like, no, wait, I have to correct you. I have to give you the proper boot order of every season. You'd get your spot blown up for sure.
But we would get the free publicity is the major positive there. It's the question of, to what degree are you willing to ruin your game for the podcast?
Listen, I mean, I'd show up wearing a Survivor Analytics shirt, and if they say, no, you can't wear that, I'd take my shirt off and I'd have it tattooed on my chest. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I'll promote this podcast till I die. The other thing I wanted to highlight early before the breakdown, Andy sees Survivor as a numbers game. That's how he describes it in his first confessional. Survivor's a numbers game. He does a whole math thing where with some factorials, and the equations they show on screen are, I will say that, they showed the math on screen as he's talking, and it was absolutely too many numbers. He basically says, if I can have good working relationships with 3 people, it will be hard to send me home. What did you think of that?
I feel like Andy in the preseason and early in this episode came across as a competent player. He recognizes that, you know, on a tribe of 6, to stay in the game, you need an alliance of 4. Everything he was saying, in theory, makes sense. And a major reason why I took him number 1 overall is because you didn't see this paranoid side of Andy in the preseason. He seemed to be very, methodical and logical in his outlook on the game. But I think he almost leans so heavily into that mathematical side of Survivor that he loses sense of the interpersonal element, where you don't need just numbers, but you need to have relationships with people that genuinely want to work with you. And I think once Andy fails in that department, he starts to spiral. We can talk about kind of the first thing that goes wrong with Andy, and that's his relationship with Rachel. He approaches Rachel, wants to work with her. He comes across as a little bit aggressive at first in, his eagerness. And Rachel is a bit hesitant.
A little bit aggressive. He goes hard in the paint. This was originally in their first conversation one-on-one, Andy is saying, let's get up and let's do yoga at sunrise together and strategize. And Rachel's going, hey, maybe on the second day on the island, we shouldn't be getting up at sunrise to have private conversations. She's completely right. And he's completely he is trying to speed run relationships here. And her reasonable rebuttal of his ideas sends him spiraling.
It's the right read by Andy in that he knows that Rachel isn't fully bought in. And that night, Andy is spinning, right? He's anxious, he's paranoid, and I think he approaches Rachel not to strategize with her, but to have like someone to lean on. There's nobody out there that's really tight with him at this point. And we saw in Survivor 46, when Ben was spiraling, Kenzie was the player that was willing to pick him up at his lowest points. And this season, the culture is very different. Rachel is not willing to pick up Andy when he's not feeling great. She reluctantly goes with him in the morning, but Andy picks up on the fact that the two of them are not real allies.
The next day, after he's gotten no sleep, the section where Andy's monologue of confessional is playing behind the shots of John chopping coconut and everyone applauding. That section could win a short film contest for horror. Like, it's the most ominous 45 seconds of Survivor I've ever seen, because it's John chopping coconut, everyone going, yay, and then Andy chopping coconut, and everyone going, you get nothing. And it's so overwrought in Andy's mind that everybody's ignoring him because they're not cheering for him like they're cheering for John. And that is it. That's his unraveling, is the coconut chop, which is so insane.
See, I saw the coconut chop as like the last straw. Like, Andy was already spiraling and he just needed one more piece of evidence to kind of push him over the edge and make him think, nobody on this tribe likes me. And that's what the coconut really meant to him. We'll talk more about Andy post-challenge because he has another meltdown there. But I don't necessarily think Andy's a bad strategic player. I think he's someone that's just kind of losing his marbles out there. And I feel like when he makes these mistakes, he's able to recognize that he's doing the wrong thing.
Let me float to you that it's a combination. I think he has some good strategy, but his execution is being marred by, he's getting in his own way, right? He knows the numbers he needs. He knows the allies he needs to build. And then everything else, the actual timing of the words out of his mouth, the choice of audience whenever he speaks, the perception of other people is just not quite right. And I think Andy wants this to be a game of numbers. And as soon as things leap off the graph paper, he's gone. It's too much.
You want to head over to the challenge?
Yeah, guess what? They're going through some stuff and they're building a puzzle. Woohoo. I love a good challenge. And this one's okay, but 2 puzzle-based challenges in the premiere does not fill me with confidence for this season challenge-wise. I will say that.
Maybe we'll start a puzzle count for the season challenges. Do you think over 75% will include some kind of puzzle?
Honestly, yeah. I feel like if there's 13 episodes and there's, 20 challenges, I bet 16 of them are puzzle-based.
Okay, I'll keep a tally.
This one, tribes start out in the water. They have to jump into a boat, paddle up to some very heavy chests full of puzzle pieces, get to shore, drag those boats up to a puzzle, and guess what? They're building the logo. Yay! A logo puzzle is the worst puzzle, man. It's so bland and it's so self-congratulatory for the show to be like, here, build this puzzle of the logo of the show you're on that's also the logo you're wearing. At least in, was it 45 with the tree 3D puzzle?
Yeah.
Or like the arch puzzle, not exactly a puzzle, but kind of a puzzle that Banu had his breakdown on. At least there's some interesting structure to those. A logo puzzle is the lowest of the low.
See, I like a logo puzzle because I feel like it perfectly encapsulates the new era of Survivor. It's, hey,
that's fair.
We have 9 logos for the new era, 41 through 49. Let's just print out 9 giant puzzles and we'll just run the same thing every season with a different logo. Oh, can we get a discount on that? Oh, yeah, we'll save money too. This is perfect. Actually, let's reduce it to 15 days instead of 26. Let's cost save him even more.
How about we just put somebody in an office complex without anything but a case of Dasani for a week? And you know what? We'll call it Survivor. Survivor Iowa, Survivor Des Moines. Couple highlights: Tuku's boat flips, and they have to get the chests back into the boat, which is pretty brutal. Gata's boat flips. Lava is in a very comfortable first place. We don't even see them finish the puzzle. I don't think they're so far ahead. We probably do see them finish it, but they finish so fast that most of the puzzle or most of the challenge is a race for second. Couple of notes: Sam in the puzzle, not great under pressure. We do not see him working well with others. He gets a little snippy pretty fast in the puzzle, which is always, in my mind, a red flag for somebody strategically down the line. Because if you can't keep up the teamwork and supportive rhetoric in the challenge, I don't think that translates well to productive conversations at Tribe. As Tuku is getting second, right? As Gata is falling behind, Andy decides to he's not working on the puzzle, and he decides to just go lie down. He sort of flops down in the sand, and Jeff goes over and is like, "Hey, are you all right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm just tired." And then they do get medical for him. He doesn't really need medical. He's just kind of having a little bit of an emotional moment. That being said, he does get a full paramedic crew taking care of him in his emotional moment. And it overshadows the end of the challenge.
It completely overshadows it. I think Andy's having some kind of, emotional breakdown or panic attack there, which I think explains what he does after the challenge as well. In terms of things that happen before the Andy fall down, I think it's funny that all of the boats start sinking because production doesn't handle this challenge the best, and they provide them with puzzle pieces that are too heavy for the boats themselves. Like, players probably got some water in the boat, but you would think when you're designing the challenge that you would account for that, right?
Oh, I think they wanted a boat flip. I think that was intentional.
They wanted a boat flip? I think that makes the whole challenge way less seamless. Like, for me, even though Lavo won this challenge, I see it as a fluky win because of the boat flipping incident. I'm not sold on Lavo yet as like the dominant tribe of the season. But as these boats are flipping over and it's a complete disaster on the production end, Jeff yells, "You want Survivor? You got Survivor right here." I'm like, this is the new era, baby. It's copy and paste challenges, Jeff yelling at the players and blaming them for their poor challenges. Looking ahead, we mentioned that Lavo wins, Tuku gets second, and then we get Andy's sequel breakdown, where Jeff asks him in front of the entire group, "Andy, what happened?" And he cracks. He says, "I'm on the bottom. They're going to vote me out. They didn't cheer for me when I opened a coconut. Nobody likes me. So my only option now is to throw my best friend John under the bus."
Yeah.
And at that moment, I thought, Andy, you're screwed. You've just openly admitted your strategy to the entire cast. How can anyone trust you here? Little did I know that Andy's strategy would work out perfectly for this episode. Because who ends up going home just 30 minutes later?
Andy is absolutely in a delusional state. I think this is a cheese touch situation. Did you ever read Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Clyde?
Oh, of course. I read Roderick Rules.
Did you read Dog Days?
I read Dog Days. What's the fourth one? Because Dog Days is the yellow
like 15
cover.
Now. There are genuinely like 15 or 16 of those now.
Yeah, that's like 15 or 16 too many.
Roderick Rules, Last Straw, Dog Days, Ugly Truth, Cabin Fever, Hard Luck, The Long Haul. Wow, there are a lot.
There's a ton. Maybe we could start Diary of a Wimpy Kid analytics, where we either read the books or watch the movies and review them on the pod. I saw your threads, by the way, of alternate analytics podcasts for random TV shows.
Yeah. Tune in, by the way, to Frasier Analytics, where we talk about the best ways to win Frasier, specifically the reboot. Anyway, I think this is a cheese touch situation because Andy has the cheese touch in this moment, right? He's in front of the other two tribes. He's in front of Jeff and God and Jeff, who are one and the same. And he says, I got to throw my best friend here under the bus. So now the rest of his tribe has a choice to make. And that choice is between get rid of the guy who's cracked now, or get rid of the guy who the cracked guy sees as a viable person to vote out. And then you take a moment and you think, all right, we could get rid of the nut job. And he's not a nut job, but we could get rid of the unstable player. It's not fair to call him a nut job. We could get rid of the unstable player, or we could get rid of this really stable, mature player on the team. He's not our biggest strength contributor. He's very well spoken. God knows you don't want a speechwriter sitting next to you at Final Tribal Council. That's a whole lot of stuff that as soon as Andy points the finger in that direction, right? We do get an animal shot coming back from the challenge. And for those of you who might be joining us, and this is your first season here on Survivor Analytics, animal shots are where production uses visual symbolism of the nature around Fiji to correspond with what's going on in the episode itself. We get a shark swimming through a reef, scattering a school of fish, right? And it crossfades perfectly into Andy walking back into camp, scattering his tribe. Andy's the shark, and none of the fish want to have anything to do with it, right? As their afternoon goes on, the shark has pointed out another direction to go and said, hey, I know you don't want to be near me. Here's my best friend who's a threat. That's a brutal combination. And I got to be honest, as soon as we got back to camp and John started to worry, I was like, it's probably done. I did not feel good about John's chances as soon as we got back to camp.
Yeah, as much as I would love to credit Andy for the John elimination down the line, I think John is more at fault for his own boot, because when they all go back, Andy gives his speech and says he was in the wrong mindset and he acted out of paranoia, which is a positive in Andy's book. It proves that he's self-aware and can recognize when he makes a mistake. That's something that we didn't see from the Bonus or Dolinskis of the world. And John starts to get paranoid that, hey, if it's not Andy, it'll probably be me going home. So I got to take the bull by the horns and take control of the game. I wrote down a quote from John. He says, if I'm going to be on this show for one episode, one glorious and perfect episode, I'd rather go out swinging and making some kind of move rather than just hoping for the best.
Oh, and I do want to give a shout out to my partner. At that point when we were watching this episode, she pointed out that was the name of the episode on Paramount Plus, which was kind of a giveaway.
Oh, that's also points for your fantasy team. John jumps into action mode, and even though Andy just threw him under the bus, he's now willing to work with Andy to vote out Annika. They attempt to pull Sam into the mix, and it's just too complicated. Like,
yeah,
I don't know what it is about these new era players, and it might be a symptom of the new era as well as the premiere itself, but people don't want to make the easy vote.
Yeah.
Whatever is the norm at camp, players want to deviate from once Tribal Council actually rolls around. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have still the slightest bit of confidence in Andy moving forward, is that players will always see Andy as a easy cut at any point in the game. So they might have the mentality of, why knock out Andy now when I can use him as a number to get rid of this other threat that's on the beach?
Andy has sealed his fate. Andy will not win Survivor. I'm very comfortable saying that. By the way, who is your winner pick for the season?
Well, I picked Andy number 1 overall, so I have to stick with that pick. Obviously, I would change it if I could, but I'm about pick integrity. And yours is
it's Teeny, baby.
Right? That's a good pick.
Yeah, so Andy sealed his fate. He will not win the show of Survivor, right? If he comes back from this, it would be the greatest performance in history.
Well, we've seen people come back from this, right? Emily did it in 45. She didn't win the season, but she started off the season and was hated.
She didn't come back from a breakdown, though. She was hated, but she was hated for being kind of gruff. This is not learning how to be approachable like Emily was. This is learning how to not be paranoid and tell everybody your dirty laundry. I don't know. I wouldn't put this in Emily in the same boot or same camp.
I think there's potential there. I think, and this might sound wild, but I think it's easier to correct an interpersonal thing on the show than correct an understanding of the strategy of the show. Like, Banu was someone that didn't know that he had to lie on Survivor. So if you're going in with that assumption, you just simply can't win. But if you're someone like Emily, that's a little bit rough around the edges, or someone like Andy, that's a little paranoid when you first go on, I think those are mistakes that you can remedy in the long term. The biggest thing for Andy looking ahead is what happens to this Gotta Tribe. Because if they go to tribal council next week, he's going to be on the chopping block. But if they start winning immunities and there's time for the dust to settle and time for these other players to rub each other the long way, that's where Andy starts to work his way up the ranks.
We'll see. I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, let's go to tribal council. Annika gets cast as kind of the leader of the tribe. Andy talks about how he was a loser in high school. John speaks incredibly well at tribal council. I mean, he's a speechwriter. He can talk, right? Quote, you shouldn't judge people by their worst moments, right? He makes things harder for himself. Obviously, this vote seems pretty darn set in stone before tribal. John speaks so well in this tribal that I think it solidifies any doubts that voters might have, because why would you want to keep around the guy who makes the unstable player sound like a nice dude, right? The guy who's leading your blind side, not exactly a blind side, but the guy who's championing throwing you under the bus, you're making him look better. That's threat level right there for John, unfortunately. That's all I've got from tribal. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, those were my main remarks as well. Mainly the thing with Annika being the leader of the tribe. Your final vote is 5 on John, 1 on Annika. So John is the first boot of the season. Not a single vote falls on Andy, so he still technically has a perfect game where he can go to the final tribal, win in a unanimous jury vote, and have 0 votes cast against him. That's still in the cards.
And that's absolutely what's going to happen.
I was surprised that Andy was roped into this plan. Maybe they told him about it, or maybe he correctly picked up on the fact that John was the real target.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, you know, obviously they really set it up for tension, right? And make the edit good. I kind of wonder what was left on the cutting room floor. Who talked to who to make this vote happen? Because we see all the scurrying about for the other votes, but not this one. Like, I wish we'd seen a little bit more.
I was sad to see John go. We mentioned it earlier. I would love to see him return, but I think production's going to be very stingy about returning player seasons. Like, we know Survivor 50 will have returning players, but, you know, we might need to wait until Survivor 60 until we get another returning player season.
He could be a good filler, though, right? Because not every player on a returning player season has to have an incredible resume.
Typically, no. But if you're going to build up 9 seasons of new players to pick from, it's just difficult to argue that you should select the person that was voted out first.
That's true. That is true. He handles it very well. His exit interview, you know, he talks about how this has given everybody in his life tons of ammunition to give him grief for the rest of his life, you know, and he welcomes it.
Yeah, I would have loved to see him in confessional. I wish I could have seen him in a final tribal and deliver a speech. That would have been very interesting.
Oh, he would have destroyed it.
And
yeah.
I listened to his exit interview with Rob Has a Podcast this morning, where he said that waiting for the premiere was a very interesting experience because on one hand, he's excited to be on TV, but on the other hand, he has a date on his calendar where he knows he's going to be embarrassed in front of the entire country in an episode that will potentially be the most viewed episode of the season.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But I think he comes away looking good, right? I did not come away from this thinking, oh, John really screwed that up and that's why he got sent home. Sometimes you can't overcome the cheese touch. And I think that's all this was in the end. I mean, I would love to hear John's take on, would he have downplayed his own rhetorical education, accomplishments, and abilities, right? Because he's such a great speaker, such a great writer. I wonder if he had mitigated that a little bit or blunted his speech a little bit, if he could have gone further by looking just a little bit more middle of the pack.
So we can now jump into winners and losers. If you're new to the podcast, we do this every week. We have a winner, player that leaves the episode looking the best, a loser, player that leaves the episode looking the worst. The only caveat is that the loser cannot be the person voted out, because otherwise, what's the point of having a loser? We also get an honorable mention from Jack. He's the shining light of the podcast. And you get a dishonorable mention from me. as the force of evil. Where do you want to start?
Let's start losers and look ahead from there.
Okay, you want to say it on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Andy. Yeah. It's got to be Andy.
The next time on was not favorable for him. Somebody says something like clingy, toxic boyfriend, right? Like he's a bad vibe around camp. Taking the John buffer away makes him hyper aware that he's on the edge. And that's just not a good spot to be in.
It's tough for me watching someone that I genuinely thought would be a great Survivor player struggle like this. It's also not fun when I'm at home minding my own business, waiting for the premiere, and I'm getting notifications from TikTok because viewers on the East Coast are watching and then going to my video and typing comments in my winner prediction video where in front of the entire world I said, I think Andy's going to win.
Oh, no.
Those people love to be loud when I'm wrong, yet I've predicted multiple winners of the new era correctly, and I get no credit for it. I predicted Kenzie, I predicted Jam Jam, I predicted D. I did all of those, I think, before the merge, and all people are going to remember is the Andy legacy. I also, in that same video, said that I don't think John would make it far in the season because of his celebrity status, and he went out first. But everyone's, put on the blinders. Let's look at the Andy take. But I got to accept defeat, but I'm not doing it yet until he goes home.
Let's go positive now. Who's your winner?
My winner is the last pick of the fantasy draft. It's Gabe. I think Gabe had a great episode. Okay. He locks down a number one ally with Sue, someone that seems completely trusting with him. And I like that dynamic of the old and the young. I think the two of them will pull in very different allies, and then they'll be able to come together and make decisions. On top of that, he got the idol. That's valid for 3 tribal councils. So I did not think I would be huge on Gabe coming into the season. I thought that Gabe would be the GameBot Andy-esque persona, and I was wrong. He's having a great start.
I mean, I think that's a fair pick. My pick, in a very similar vein, was Sue. I love that alliance, and I like to look back at Cook Islands, the season we covered right before this. Becky was in a great spot for a long, long time, right? Yul had the idol, drew all the attention, but he had to have a number one, right? And that was Becky. And I think for Gabe, that's Sue. And it'll be a question of what other things can Sue do, right? Because Gabe does have to worry about TK being conscious of something going on. Sue just has to worry about taking care of her ally. So that's the only kind of differentiation there.
She also aligns with Caroline this episode. And I think Caroline talks about the mother-daughter dynamic between the two of them. So I think it's great for Sue in that she has an ally with someone that has a powerful item in the idol, but she's also developing connections outside that alliance in the event that she ever needs to flip on him. Who's your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is Sergei Malyutin.
Okay.
Who, of course, born 4th of October, 1859 and died December 6th, 1937. He was a Russian painter of fine crafts, and most of his oil paintings are portraits. He's known primarily for designing the first set of Matryoshka dolls carved by Vasily Zyodoskin in 1890. So the original designer of the Matryoshka nesting dolls is my honorable mention this week.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay.
I did think about, I will say, giving it to Diary of a Wimpy Kid 16, Big Shot, where a disastrous field day at school prompts Greg to renounce athletic activities, but his mom makes him try out for basketball, and he's put on a B team where he tries to lead them to victory. Instead, I went with the creator of the Russian nesting dolls.
A real tight battle between the two of them.
Yeah.
My original dishonorable mention was going to a player. I was originally going to give it to Rome. Rome is just on the outside of his tribe.
I forgot we could give those to players.
Yeah, like, he's on the outside of the tribe. The other contestants there literally went hunting for him as he was searching for an idol. But I'm not giving it to Rome. I'm doing a last-minute audible. And instead, I will take credit where it's due, and I'm giving the dishonorable mention to myself.
Whoa!
For the past 2 years, Jack, I've been begging our fantasy league to not give me the last pick of the draft. And for the last, 3 drafts, I got the last pick, and it actually ended up pretty good. I had some pretty high-quality players fall to me. And this time, I finally had the honor of the number 1 pick, and I blew it. And I took Andy in the first round. I took Rome in the third. So I think for the future, I'm okay with the last pick now. Take the autonomy out of my hands. That way, if things go poorly, I can say, hey, it's not on me. I have no responsibility here. It just makes my life a little bit easier.
I will say you do have 30 more points than I do as of week 1, but
it's about the long
time
game,
will tell.
Like, I think Andy will rack up a lot of points while he's around. It's just a question of, how long will that be?
That's fair. I mean, listen, I like this. I like that you're saying you'll take the last pick because I'm not crazy about it. But, well, listen, thank you for tuning in this week on Survivor Analytics. Make sure to follow us on social media everywhere, that you want to do that. Episodes come out every week, and we'll be here for the whole season. So tune in, and we'll see you next time.